Smoke coiled slowly from the chimney, lazily vanishing into the bitter Montana sky. Snow hadn't started yet, but the air carried its threat, stiff with silence, and that raw, metallic taste that always came before the storm. The pine trees at the ridge's edge didn't sway, they watched. Like sentinels in black coats, Silas Hart stepped down from his buckboard. The leather reins still looped through his fingers. He didn't look at the sky, didn't need to. He could feel it in his bones, that old ache near the scar on his rib where the musket ball had passed through 20 years ago. That wound spoke when the world changed. The barn door creaked. Not from wind. From her, she wasn't supposed to be there. A young woman, not more than 30, stood hunched in the open kitchen doorway, sleeves rolled halfway up her trembling arms. She had flour on her hands, and something more dangerous. In her eyes, grief, the kind of grief that made a person go still, like a deer caught in a snare, quiet, compliant, broken. She stood over the stove in Silas's kitchen, wooden spoon in hand, slowly stirring the pot of elk stew he'd left warming when he rode into town that morning. She was crying, not loudly, not with sobs, but the kind of crying that leaked, as if her bones were melting and the water of her soul was coming out through her skin. Her back faced him, but he saw her shoulders jerk, saw her hand pause above the bubbling stew. Silas didn't say a word. Just walked past her, set the sack of grain on the floor beside the woodpile. He didn't ask who she was. Didn't ask how she got in. Didn't reach for the rifle on the rack. He just watched. Her hands didn't stop stirring, only after a long minute, after the silence began to ring. Did she speak? I didn't steal nothin'. Just needed to get warm. Her voice cracked halfway through, like a branch breaking under slow weight. Silas turned to the fire, tossed in a log, watched it hiss. There's bread in the tin, he said flatly, if it ain't moldy. She blinked, took a half step back, as if kindness was harder to trust than a threat. Her eyes were raw, pale blue, the kind of pale that comes from too much weather, too little shelter. She wasn't wearing a coat, just a shawl over her shoulders, threadbare, with a rip near the corner. Her shoes were mismatched. The laces on one had been replaced with wire. She took the bread. Didn't eat it. Just held it. Silas walked to the cupboard, pulled out a chipped bowl, and ladled stew into it. He set it down on the table with a faint thud. Sat across from her, elbow on the wood, watching the steam rise. Still, no questions, no stories. Just two humans and one bowl of heat between them. She sat slowly, spooned a bit of stew, and paused halfway to her lips. You got a wife? She asked. Silas's jaw tightened. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a piece of red wool, a strip of fabric, weathered and frayed. He ran it between his fingers. Had. A gust of wind outside made the shutters groan. Snowflakes finally began to tap the glass. The woman swallowed. Not just the stew, but something heavier. She didn't ask how long ago. Didn't need to. Some griefs announce themselves like thunder. Others just hang in the room like smoke. She stood, moved to the stove, and began cleaning without being asked. Her shoulders were squared now, as if she needed the movement to stop from shattering. Silas watched her hands, small but strong. Fingers blistered, knuckles bruised. One nail was black with blood, dried beneath it. She moved like someone who'd cooked for others before, not with flair, but with rhythm. Survival rhythm. The kind women learned when they had no choice. He poured a bit of water from the kettle into a cup. Set it down. What's your name? He asked, without looking at her. She didn't answer. Just kept scrubbing. I can guess if you want. Still nothing. He didn't push. Just let the fire crackle, let the wind rattle the eaves. Let the quiet fill in the parts where words couldn't go. An hour passed like that. Then another. Night came early. By then she was curled in the farthest corner under a horse blanket, her head against the stone wall. Her boots, if they could still be called that, left by the hearth to dry. Silas sat in his chair, cleaning the old Winchester that hadn't fired a bullet in years. Asterisk, he wasn't afraid. But he wasn't stupid either. Around midnight she started murmuring. Just faint sounds at first, then names, then something close to begging. Her hands twitched in sleep. Her face contorted. No, no, Annie, don't look. Silas didn't move, just listened. A man who'd lost enough to know the sound of nightmares that didn't end when you woke up. He let her speak to the dark. At dawn. She was gone, but not far. He found her outside, barefoot in the snow, crouched behind the wagon, holding something wrapped in cloth. A revolver. He didn't reach for his rifle. Didn't even blink. She wasn't pointing it at him. She was pointing it at her own chest. Her hands were shaking. He walked forward, boots crunching slowly in the snow. Asterisk. I don't want to go back, she said, voice hoarse. You don't understand. I can't go back. Asterisk. He stopped 3 feet from her. I didn't ask you to. Asterisk. She looked up, startled, as if those words were impossible. Her lip bled from where she'd bitten it raw. You don't even know me, she whispered. No, Silas said quietly. But I've buried enough people to know when someone don't want to be one of them. The snow kept falling. She dropped the gun. Asterisk. Then she dropped herself, knees buckling into the white, breath heaving like she'd just run from fire. Asterisk. Silas picked up the revolver. It was empty. Asterisk. He didn't say anything, just helped her up. Didn't carry her, just steadied her. Asterisk. By the time they reached the cabin again, the stew was cold. But something else had started to warm. She didn't say thank you, and he didn't expect it. Asterisk. That night. He put the red wool strip back into the drawer. For the first time in 5 years. And outside, the storm howled like an old ghost leaving the valley behind. Asterisk. The storm didn't stop. It shifted. Asterisk. What had been a brittle snowfall the day before now churned in heavy sheets, wind dragging powder like torn cloth across the valley floor. The horses were restless. The chimney smoked wrong. And the pine trees groaned like something ancient was waking. Asterisk. Silas woke early. Not to a sound, but to an absence. The cabin was too still. He sat up, listening. Asterisk. A scraping, barely audible. Wood on wood. Asterisk. He stepped down barefoot, rifle leaning in the corner, and found her, the girl with no name, crouched by the door, sawing kindling with a blade too dull to bite. Her hands were blistered red. He didn't speak. Just stepped around her, opened the door to the wind, and began splitting logs the way a man does when silence is the only language he has left. Each strike of the axe was a heartbeat. Each thud in the snow, a memory buried deeper. Asterisk. When he returned, she was on her knees, scraping the hearth with a wet rag. Steam clung to her collarbone. Her lips were chapped and cracked, but her back was straighter now, like a wire had been pulled tight inside her. He noticed a tear in her skirt that hadn't been there before. He noticed, too, that the rifle had been moved, just slightly. She was testing him, or maybe testing herself. Asterisk. The storm trapped them for 3 days. Asterisk. Wind screamed. Roof groaned. The cows moaned low from the corral, spooked by shadows that didn't belong to anything real. Asterisk. On the second night, the girl collapsed while lifting the water bucket. Asterisk. Silas caught her before she hit the floor. Her skin was too hot, her breath shallow. Asterisk. He carried her to the bed. Not the cot, the real one, the one that still smelled faintly of lavender and dust. The one he hadn't touched in 5 winters. Asterisk. He pressed a wet cloth to her forehead, hand steady. She trembled under his palm like a wounded bird, wings clipped, feathers full of smoke. She spoke in her fever. The first word, Annie? Asterisk. The second, don't watch. The third was a scream, silent, sharp, caught in her throat like a noose. She thrashed once, then lay still. Asterisk. In the firelight, he saw the edge of a letter inside her coat pocket. Torn, blood-stained, smelled of pine sap and iron. The name on the envelope was barely legible, but the return address was clear. Asterisk. Rev. Elijah Caldwell, Broken Chapel Mission, Wyoming Territory. Asterisk. Silas didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he kept the fire alive. He fed her broth with a spoon, sat beside her when the shivers got worse, tucked the blanket tighter when the window cracked from the cold. asterisk on the third day. Her fever broke, asterisk she opened her eyes like someone surfacing from a long, dark river. You stayed, she whispered. He didn't answer. Just handed her the water. She drank, slowly, then looked at him. Asterisk, I had a daughter, she said, as if the words were heavy and sharp all at once. Her name was Annie. Silas nodded. She didn't make it through the last winter. Fever. Took her in the night. I'd buried her with a spoon in her hand because she wouldn't let go of it. Asterisk, she smiled. Just barely. The kind of smile that feels like bleeding. Asterisk, I ran after that, she said. From him. From God. From the sound my boots made when I walked over the place where she lay. Asterisk, Silas stood. He wasn't one for comfort. But he walked to the cupboard. Took down a small bowl and ladled stew into it. The same stew, the one she'd made while crying. Asterisk, he set it in front of her. Sat across the room, she ate, each bite slower than the last. Like something sacred. That night they didn't speak. But in the dark she asked one question. Asterisk, why are you still here? Asterisk, he didn't answer. Not with words. Asterisk, he opened a drawer beside the bed, pulled out a faded piece of red wool, and set it gently beside the fire. Asterisk, it was his wife's shawl she'd knitted the year the boy was born. He'd buried her with the rest, but not this. He couldn't. The girl, no, Miriam now, looked at the cloth like it held something fragile. You lost them both? She whispered. Asterisk, Silas nodded. His voice, when it came, was more gravel than breath. Asterisk, they said my son died a hero. But I never saw his body. Just a sack of metals and a wooden box that rattled. Asterisk, Miriam closed her eyes, not from sleep, but from something deeper. Silas stood the next morning and brought out the rifle. He didn't offer it to her. Just handed her an empty can and pointed toward the snowbank out back. Asterisk, she stared at him. Why? Asterisk, you need to know how, he said. In case the storm isn't the last thing that comes. She didn't argue. By dusk, she could hit the can from 20 feet. Asterisk, he watched her shoulders change, not just with recoil, but with memory, after she cleaned the rifle the way someone handles an old photograph. That night, a calf died in the barn. Silas didn't tell her, but she heard him digging. Asterisk, she came out barefoot, coatless, holding the lantern. They buried it together, shoveling slow into frozen dirt. She hummed something. A lullaby. The same one he'd heard in her sleep. He didn't ask what it meant, but that night, she left a drawing on the table. Asterisk, a child's drawing. Crumpled, water-stained, torn in the corner, stick figures, a woman, a little girl, a cabin, asterisk, and beside it, a man holding a red square in his hand. Silas stared at until the fire went out. The storm eased by morning, asterisk, but something heavier had started to stir. Not in the sky, but in the ridges above them, asterisk, boot prints in the snow. 2 sets, fresh, asterisk, and in the snowbank where the can had been. A bullet hole, but not from her, asterisk, he picked it up. Ran his fingers along the edge, asterisk, the girl stood behind him. Breath short, face pale, asterisk, they found me, she said. And in her eyes, the storm was just beginning. The sun broke through on the 5th morning, not warm, just brighter. The kind of light that reveals things the dark was kind enough to hide. Asterisk, the snow on the ridge had flattened. But 2 shadows moved across it, riders, one on a pale horse. The other dark and lathered from a hard push through the trees. They didn't follow the trail. They didn't knock. Asterisk, Silas watched them through the kitchen window, hand already on the rifle, eyes narrowed. He didn't reach for the shells just yet. Asterisk, Miriam stood behind him, still as glass. Her hands trembled where they held the back of the chair. Asterisk. That's him, she said. Her voice was hollow, like something scraped from the inside of an old bell. Asterisk, the riders dismounted slow. One was thin and ghost-like, barely 20, with a knife on his hip and twitch in his step. But the other, asterisk, tall, broad across the chest, hair like worn leather. A silver cross around his neck. Elijah Caldwell. He carried himself like a man used to pulpits and pistols. One hand on his holster, the other holding a book, though no one was sure if it was for reading or hiding what came next. Asterisk, Silas opened. The door before they reached it. Asterisk the air was sharp with cold and something more. Memory wrought fear. Asterisk Caldwell smiled the way a Volf might. You got guests, he said, voice honeyed with menace. We've been tracking a poor, lost woman. Thought maybe she wandered into your barn? Asterisk Silas didn't blink. Plenty of lost things end up here. Caldwell glanced past him, eyes scanning the cabin. He held up a folded photograph, a woman and child. The child's face was inked out. The woman's face, Miriam's, looked younger, whole, asterisk. She's dangerous, he said, quieter now. Ran off with church funds. Lied to the law, took things she had no right to take. Asterisk Silas didn't look at the photograph. I've known dangerous. She ain't it. The boy beside Caldwell stepped forward, gun twitching. But Caldwell raised a hand. We'll stay the night. Your barn's still standing? Asterisk Silas nodded once. Dry hay, don't touch the black mule. He bites. Asterisk that night, Silas sat by the fire, rifle across his knees. Miriam didn't sleep. She stood by the window, shawl tight around her shoulders, the pistol tucked into her waistband, now fully loaded. He'd seen to that. Asterisk. Why didn't you let them take me? She asked. Asterisk, he didn't answer. Just looked into the fire. Asterisk, he'll burn it all down, she whispered. He doesn't stop. Asterisk, neither do storms, Silas said. But we build cabins anyway. Asterisk, hours passed like frost. The wind picked up again. Somewhere outside, an owl called. Asterisk, then a flicker, orange light through the window, the barn. Flames licked up the wall like a beast rearing its head. Smoke curled black against the stars. Then a scream, the mule. A gunshot, another. Asterisk Silas stood. Miriam grabbed the rifle before he could. You don't have to. I do, she said. They ran. The snow crunched with heat now. The fire crackling like dry bones. Asterisk, the boy was already down, gut shot, crawling in the hay, crying for someone named Mama. Asterisk Caldwell was at the creek, dragging something, a rope, across. A promise. Miriam stepped into the light, gun raised. He turned, smiled again. Asterisk. There she is, he said. You look just like the day I baptized you. Covered in sin and thinking you're clean. Asterisk, let her go, Silas said, voice low. Rifle steady. Caldwell's smile broke. You ain't the judge here, rancher. Asterisk, no, Silas said. But I've buried better men than you. Caldwell moved first, but the snow slipped beneath him, and Miriam was faster. The shot rang out like thunder at close range. No echo, just finality. Asterisk Caldwell stumbled back, stared at the blood blooming on his coat like a red flower. Asterisk, he looked at Miriam. Tried to speak, failed, then he dropped the rope, fell with him. Asterisk Silas lowered the rifle. His arm shook now, the old wound torn open from the sprint, blood soaking through his shirt. Asterisk Miriam dropped beside him, pressing her hands to his shoulder. You're hit, she breathed. Just a graze. Asterisk, you're lying. Asterisk, he looked at her then, really looked. Asterisk, you didn't have to shoot him. Asterisk, yes I did. Asterisk silence fell. Not the heavy kind, the clean kind? After a storm passes and all the branches have already broken, dawn came slow. They buried Caldwell under the ridge. Near the place where snow melted first in spring, Asterisk Miriam didn't speak. Just set the photograph beside the shallow cross and stepped back. Asterisk. The boy they'd shot lived through the night. Asterisk Silas gave him water, a blanket. Sent him south with the pale horse and enough food to reach the next town. Miriam watched from the porch. He'll come back, she said. Asterisk. Maybe, Silas said. But not as the same boy. She didn't stay long after, left before the last of the ice had melted, while the morning was still blue with quiet. Asterisk, she wrote him a note. Folded once. Set beside the red wool shawl on the mantel. Asterisk. You saved. More than me. Silas never saw her again, but when spring came, he found a little wooden spoon left by the fence post. Asterisk carved, delicate, with a flower etched in the handle. He placed it on the mantel beside the note. Sometimes, at dusk, he'd sit on the porch with the rifle across his lap, Listening to the wind tell stories no one else would hear, the cabin stayed quiet, but not empty. Something had changed. Not the silence, only the way it felt. Asterisk.